So we're going to get started with our webinar. Welcome to Wednesday Wind Down with Dan. No friends today, just me. This is the webinar and YouTube show for and about outdoor activities, outdoor enthusiasts. All right, I've kind of in the past I've said for frustrated outdoor folks, that people that can't be outdoors due to COVID-19, been getting out a little bit more often, so a lot less frustrated. So. I'm Dan Conger. I'm the host of this one. Cheers to you all. We appreciate you being here. Tonight, we're talking about gear and how you deal with how I deal with gear after a trip, and actually how I store it. So I'm going to share my process for how I deal with it, and then if there's anybody else out there that wants to chime in and throw some comments, I'd love to hear how you work with your gear. So with that said, I'm gonna jump in and show you some photos that I took earlier today. So when I come home from a trip, I'm a pretty organized person. I'm pretty methodical, so I'm usually on top of cleaning up my gear pretty soon. If I come home at a reasonable time, I'm going to do it the same day. If not, I give myself 1, maybe 2 days before I go through my pack. I'm not a person to let a pack sit for multiple days or to have a big pile. But that said, you need a place to work. So I've got my pack out for you. And just so you all know, just because I love you all so much, my pack has been clean for weeks after I've come back from my trip. So I packed it back up with gear. It's actually all clean. Nothing's dirty and smelly. So let's talk about the first thing that I'm going to be pulling out of my pack. Is clothing, right? So maybe I have the stinky clothing I was wearing that I changed out of at the trailhead, but I'm pulling out the clothing that's come out there. So so the crusty socks, the stinky shirt, all that stuff is just coming out. But that first step that I do is to separate those into 2 piles. Now I've got I'm just starting to do piles of gear, right? Because that's my system, is I do piles and then I go back through them. So realistically, I'm probably doing this on the back patio, but wherever works, right? So I've got 1 pile of dirty clothes to wash, and then I've got another pile of clothes that can be put away. So this trip, it was pretty warm. So I used my gloves and my hat once. No need to wash that. My rain shell, did not use it. And even if I did, I'm not going to wash that. I'm going to really minimize the amounts of time that I wash my rain shell. Same for my down jacket. I'm going to minimize the number of times that I wash that. I don't need to subject it to that additional abuse. So now I've got 2 piles of gear, stuff to put away, stuff to wash. The next step that I'm going to be doing is now I'm going to get into more stuff I'm going to wash. So now I pulled out my cook kit. So I've got my pot, my spoon, and my rehydration cozy, right? Those have not seen soap and water for a little while, or they've seen water, but now they're going to get a chance for some real hot water and some good soap in the kitchen sink and good scrubbing. Let's be honest. Let's talk about camping clean, right? Or hiking clean. It's you clean out all the food, you swirl around some hot water, you drink it, and maybe you're going to get another swish with hot boiling water, and that's it. That's the most camping clean is. I don't ever use soap on my utensils when I'm out on the trail, although I do bring soap mainly for me. So now I've got 2 piles to wash, but they're going to be slightly different. Obviously, one's going in the laundry. Side note: if I'm on a day hike in my clothing, if I have a clothing pile, and I think I've been exposed to poison oak, they do not go in the hamper. They're going straight in the laundry on their own. Well, let's be frank. Actually, this stuff, when I'm coming back from a week on the trail, that's going straight in the laundry too. I'm not mixing that with anything else, the household. Could you imagine if I put a shirt with a week of baked in grime and I put that in with bed sheets? Oh boy, what a disaster. I'll need to set my tent up outside and sleep in that. Okay. So next pile, stuff I need to dry. So this is stuff that isn't necessarily dirty, but I don't want to put it away wet. So keep your gear clean and dry. So I'm going to take my, essentially, mainly my hydration kit. So that's going to be, so I've got my knock bladder, the hose, my filter, any water bottles I have. I'm going to set those aside, spin the caps off. I'm just going to set them in my garage and let them dry out for a couple of days, and I'll put them away. It's as simple as that. Realistically, I probably am going to need to back flush my my filter there. So, okay, what's next? So we got a dry pile. Oh, the thing that might go into the dry pile is my tent. So this is really a seasonal thing, right? So this was a summer trip. We didn't see any rain. There wasn't even any ground moisture to speak of. So my tent can pretty much be put away right away. Winter or a spring trip where I'm going to be out in the rain. Yeah, it's going to be, now it's going out. It's going to be hung up on the clothesline under my patio cover, or hung up in my garage, some other way to dry. So, but for this one, it wasn't particularly wet. Okay, next one is, trash pile, right? That's why I brought out the trash bucket. And if for some reason I need to delay on getting to my gear, I'm going to jump straight ahead to trash, and I'm going to clean out my bear can. The bear can, man, at the end of a trip, like the last couple days of the trip, it's starting to smell pretty ripe. And let's pull that stuff out and get it out as soon as you can. Now, nothing worse than opening up your beer can and having it smell bad when you're ready to do it. I put it away. I'll let it sit on the workbench or in the garage for a couple of days with the lid open before I do anything with it. Now, I want to look at the comments, because this is, some people know what's coming next. Is let's see. So what you don't want to do, right, is to let that swelter, right? If you leave that bear can sitting out in your backyard in the sun and let it simmer and in-home compost in your backyard, that's going to be really rank, right? Now, your spouse is going to say, that doesn't need to come in the house, which is a great idea. This this is a rather smart woman. She goes, no, just put it straight out in the backyard. Well, that's great, but please clean it, right? Because this bear can was salvaged, but it was out there 3-4 weeks later. I know who that was. We aren't going to reveal their name. Okay, so got the bear can clean. Okay, my next pile that I'm doing is repair. So in this particular pile, I've got my air pad, and I did a patch on the trail. I put a small hole in it, patched. I wanted to double check it. Was that repair still valid? Did it still hold air? And my headlamp, I wanted to put new batteries in it. But it might also be things that I've cobbled together or created, because my trail name is MacGyver. So maybe it's a windscreen that I tried on the trail, and that did not work. I'm going to put it in the repair or the reinvent pile. So that's my next one. So then one last one is air out. So this isn't quite dry, but in this one I've got my quilt or sleeping bag and my backpack. Pardon me, what I do with my backpack is I'll shake it out and get all those little crumbs and micro trash out of my garage floor, and I'll just hang it upside down in the garage and let it air out. Basically, I want to make sure that any last little remnants of moisture or odor, give it a chance to get away. A sleeping bag or a quilt, putting it on your line and turn it inside out and let it air out is a great way to do it, right? So let's get some of that funk away from that. You don't want to wash your down every single time, right? It's going to shorten the life of it. And if you haven't washed down before, man, it's an emotional experience, because you really, watching your big fluffy bag come to nothing is kind of can bring you to tears if you aren't familiar with the process. It's actually really, really easy, but it's kind of a scary thing to do. The thing that I've taken to doing lately is putting my quilt and my down puffy, throwing that into the dryer, turning it to air fluff, no heat, and just run it for 15-20 minutes. It's amazing how it brings that loft right back up, before I store it. But airing out is a really good technique, and you could probably air out lots of different things. So so just to kind of summarize how the piles or the ways I deal with my gear is, some of it I'm just ready to put straight away, right? It's clean, it doesn't need repairing, boom, just put it away. There's other stuff I need to wash. There's some stuff I need to let dry. I'll just let that sit out on the bench or in the garage. There's the trash pile, right? Let's deal with that right away before it gets rank. And then stuff I need to repair, and then some things that maybe I want to air out. So for whoever's watching live tonight, it'd be great if you got some comments. Throw out how you deal with your gear when you come back in. How much of that do you do on the trail? How much are you doing that when you come back in? I'd love to hear some of those comments. So let's see. Oh, here's a good question that came up on this one. Was Dave asked, how often do you clean or rinse out your pack? Never. I actually don't. Wouldn't be a bad idea to do it. So I had a Osprey pack that I bought used from a friend, and I don't even know if he washed it. I used it for a couple of years, and then it tore, it was ripped, and I ended up sending it into Osprey to warranty it. And they just said, hey, before you send it to us, all we ask is that you wash it. So I washed it in the tub, and that was the only time I've ever washed a pack. Probably wouldn't be a bad idea to put it on a once a year, once every other year, maybe as often as I wash my down bag. So I probably wash my down bag, since I'm not super outdoor active. I wash my down bag maybe every other year. So that wouldn't be a bad idea. Maybe 1 year wash one and one wash the other. That's not a bad idea. So let's see. Dave also has a comment that he does some basic cleaning out on the trail. That's, just a drop of Dr. Bronner soap and a little scour pad. Good reminder for everybody is, if you're going to be using soap, do not put it back in the water your water source. Let's move it 200 feet away from the water source before you dump it out. Okay. So the next thing I wanted to talk about was how I store my gear. And this is what's kind of interesting is like, doesn't everybody do it this way? No, everybody doesn't do it this way. But so here's my method. I've got a corner in the garage that I have a shelf, and I use totes. I use these Rubbermaid style totes. And because I'm the OCD organized person that I am, I've got them labeled, and I've actually got a little bit of a system here. So here's how I have them. We can't quite read the labels. So that upper one in the corner is my tent. I actually have a second tent, second backpacking tent that's labeled, but this is the one that I use. I have the additional yellow tape. So this is my tarp tent notch that I use. That blue tote, and the tent, I just store loosely in there. No stuff bag, right? It just goes straight in there. It's kind of fluffy and big. I keep the extra stakes. So I have regular Easton spike, they look like a big nail stake. I have those stakes in there. And I think I got some MSR stakes. So I got some stakes in there, but I also have some sand stakes or snow stakes that I use if I know I'm going to be in deep desert sand. So I can swap those out. Stays in the same tote. Okay, so that's the tent. The blue one right below that is my sleep system. And I said my sleep system because I keep my quilt, my summer quilt in there. I keep my pillow and I keep my air pad all in that same tote. It's relatively fluffy. I don't bother with the cotton stuff sack that some of them come with. Definitely not compressed. I don't want to compress it for long periods of time. Generally, I don't like the idea of stuffed sacks. I don't do that. I am a believer that firm, compact pieces are hard to work with when you stuff your pack. It's hard enough working with that fixed shape of a bear can, and I'd rather have things more pliable. But that's me. So that's my sleep system. The section down below that is the rest of my kit, right? So that small tote, I've got my stove, my pot, my water filter, my rain kilt. I'm trying to think of, hand sanitizer, extra toilet paper, things like that. So And then that bottom one is my backpack. And I actually have I have like maybe 2 other backpacks that are in there as well. And then the last one, that gray one, is my backpacking food. So what I really like about this system is if I grab 3, maybe 4 totes, I have just about everything I need. That tent tote, when I pull the tent out, I flip it upside down, I know it's empty. My sleep system, same thing. I flip it upside down, it's empty. My backpacking kit, just about everything in there goes with me. Occasionally there's something that won't go on a trip and it will go on another trip. The backpack, that's just kind of the way it is. And the reason I'm using these totes is I'm storing them in my garage. And should a mouse ever get in my garage, man, I would just be beside myself if I had, my $300 quilt with a hole chewed through it, or a nest of baby mice in my quilt. That would just destroy me. Now, if you have the opportunity to have a gear closet, which is like a wonderful idea, then maybe the stuff sack or hanging your bag might be a better system. But for me in the garage, these totes work really well. And I also know that when the tote's empty, I've got everything on there. One of those totes on the top is a green one. It just says backpacking supplies. So those are things that have been in my kit before, but I'm making different iterations. So you will find in that backpacking supplies, you'll find an alcohol stove that I've toyed with. You'll find a different pot that I've used. You'll find different windscreens that I've used. You'll find all different lengths of rope. You get the idea, right? Things that I will occasionally trade in and out of my system, but I'm not going to use consistently. That small gray one that says kit, when that's empty, everything's in my backpack. When it's not empty, hopefully I've left something on purpose, because I don't use a checklist. It's either in that tote or it's in my backpack. One last thing on the food. Hey, this is a great idea on food, is I've got bases for all my meals. So I have, some instant rice. I have some other things like mashed potatoes, things that I could put together meals from, and get started on that one. So because food has always been the biggest challenge for me, is I can get my gear going in 20 minutes and I can be ready to go out on the trail. Food's a little bit more of a challenge. So, okay. So here's Sandra's comment. She goes, when we return from the trail, we clean up immediately. She goes, she stores her gear. She hangs her pack on the wall and she leaves a few items in the open pack. Okay. And so she leaves her sleep pad, her stove, and her rain cover are always in her pack. Okay. Good idea. I like that too. I think if your spouse backpacks, your significant other's backpacks, right, you're going to have different priorities. You will very likely have a different system here. Now, what I had to crop out of this one on this upper shelf, I've got another 4 or 6 totes for car camp gear, right? Because I realized that was a tough transition for me, was to switch from backpacking to car camp and back and forth, because everything you need is in your backpack and you're good for a week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks. But you go car camping and you don't bring a chair and you're like, wow, that looks really cool. A bottle opener for my beer, what a wonderful idea. And you start realizing a cast iron skillet would be really cool too. Those are nothing I'm going to take on a backpacking on the trail. So a little different. Okay. Let's see. I think that was let's see what else. Yeah, agreed. Car camping is harder. That's a really good comment, Dave, is it's harder after you've been backpacking for a while. Okay. So let's switch out of this. Okay. So a couple other thoughts. Clothing. I'm curious to hear how you store your clothing. For me, all of my clothing comes back in the house. Nothing stays out in the garage. And the reason I do that is I'm going to use my same hiking pants, my same socks, the same bandanas, et cetera, for day hikes, right? I'm going to go day hikes all the time throughout the year. So I want to have that accessible. I just keep it in my dresser. And I've got a drawer with generally sporting equipment. My synthetic tees, I might use for exercise while I'm in town, or I might use them for hiking, right? So I've got that. I also keep my down jacket and my rain shell in the hall closet. I'll use my down jacket if I'm traveling to a colder climate. So for work, if I'm going to the East Coast in the winter, right, that's definitely coming with me. Same with the rain shell, same with the warm gloves, same with the hat. So like those are multi-use for me. Now, if you had specialized clothing, like if you were a skier or you did some, serious mountain climbing, right, that's going to be a little different. So that you might have a separate closet or a separate tote for clothing that you're not going to use for anything else other than its intended purpose. For me, a lot of my backpacking gear, or backpack clothing rather, is crossover gear. It moves between them. Now, if I showed up in a hiking shirt and nylon hiking pants to a customer event, they're going to look at me a little weird. Okay. I haven't got that. Another thought on storage: long-term stuffing, long-term compression on a bag is never good for pretty much any piece of gear. So, the tent goes generally loose in a tote. The sleeping bag goes loose in a tote. My air pad goes relatively loose in a tote. So I'm not compressing any of that. On the trail, right, those things are getting jammed down. For Dave mentioned that he found that his quilt packs a little easier if he puts it in his stuff sack. What I've done is I'll put my quilt and my down at the very bottom, and then that gets wrapped in a waterproof bag. And then my bear can and all my other heavy crap goes on top of it. I don't know if it's as compact as Dave's, but for me, it seems to fit a little bit better. It gives me a little more squish. Okay, we'll take a look at the comments and then we'll see where we are. Excuse me. If you got any other thoughts or how you store yours, I'd love to hear it. I like Dave's comment. Dave has found, so on his comment on rinsing out or cleaning out the pack, I hadn't thought about this one. He said he found that the straps will get stiff from salt, and once rinsed, it softens them up. I hadn't really thought about that, because I've noticed like load lifters, or even the sternum straps, or the shoulder harness straps. Those can be stiff, especially they're only worked in a very, very narrow area. And salt and sweat, that would definitely make them stiffer. So that's a good idea. Okay. I think I might have to put that into my rotation to do a cleanup. Okay. That's about what I've got for this one. I don't want to beat this topic up too much. So, it's always a great idea. However you do it, take care of your gear, do it sooner rather than later. Don't leave your expensive gear to get gross. Don't leave it outside. Don't let it ferment. That's all disgusting stuff. And when you're ready to use it, you're going to have to do all this extra work, right? So I've found that if you do your repairs now, while it's fresh on your mind, you remember, I got a slow leak, or this isn't working quite right, or this valve needs to be cleaned out of my stove. You don't have to necessarily do it that day, but put it in a method that you won't accidentally pull it out of your gear closet or out of your gear tote and start using it, assuming that it was going to be working okay. Because that would be a real bummer, is to get back on the trail and like, crap, I forgot that this was a problem last time, right? Okay, that's what I got for today. That's the all I have on the content for tonight. Next week, we're going to be talking about Leave No Trace. I'm going to have a guest on, Al Bates, and we're going to talk Leave No Trace and kind of how we bring that in. All right. So many of us are familiar with that concept, but I think it's so worth repeating and help spread the gospel of Leave No Trace. So that's for tonight. Thanks. Good to see y'all. Cheers. Have a great evening now. Take care.